leave, win or lose, with their head held high.
To go out and hunt our nation's enemies where they live.
There were some guys that I fought in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done what I did to them.
But a man should be dangerous.
Yes.
We should have it under control. Hi, I'm Randy Roselle, retired Navy SEAL and combat veteran, here today with Steffen Banta, BJJ black belt and world champion. We are the Patriot Point Show. We're going to talk to you about all things tactical, BJJ, and really all things American, all right, which Steffen and I both love, and we think you're going to love it too. Today, since we have Steffen on the show, and we will always have Steffen on the show, is, you know, I'm a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, but I've competed a little bit, but nowhere close to the level that Steffen has, and I've got myself mentally ready and prepared for missions, for combat operations, to go out and hunt our nation's enemies where they live. But we also know that we have a lot of listeners and people that like our show that, you know, maybe they're not going to be operators, they're not going to be hunting enemy where they live, but they're BJJ practitioners. And, you know, they want to compete and they want to go do these tournaments. And, you know, they don't often have the chance to talk to somebody at your level that's competing at your level yet, and to help, like, you know, new competitors out there, and even old competitors like myself. You know, since you've done such a high level of competition, you know, what could you share with them to help them? You know, what is your secret for mentally preparing for matches?
For sure. So I think when I first started, the wins and losses were a lot more important for me, right? And as I've gotten, you know, more time in the sport, I think right now I've been training about 8.5 years, somewhere in there, maybe a little less. I got my black belt in about 6. But I think for me, like the thing that I give competitors, like brand new competitors, like my friends that are, you know, white or blue belts that are just starting to compete, I just tell them it really doesn't matter. That's a big thing. Like be outcome independent, like want to win, be competitive, right? But your family's still going to love you after you compete, whether you win or lose. You know, like especially at the beginning thing is make sure you don't get injured. Yeah. Right? Like there's no heroes in a local tournament. You know, don't let your arm get snapped in a kimura, or, you know, don't get leg locked and get your leg broken. At the higher levels, you know, I think going in there knowing like, hey, I'll let something go to take something. I think that's fine. I let my leg break like a year and a half ago, one of my matches, and I ended up winning by submission. But the thought of tapping didn't even come into my mind. It wasn't I'm so tough. It's just I wasn't going to accept that, and it's at a high level on a pro stage. Yeah. And, you know, my dad's watching. I'm not going to let him see me submit to another man, right? And, you know, that's just my mentality in that way. But getting ready for tournaments and kind of the mindset everybody across from you is just a man, right? And I know the work and dedication. One thing I'd say is if I don't feel that I'm in a moment where I'm ready, I just won't compete. Right? That's kind of always what I've done. So like if I know I didn't put in the work in a certain area, I just won't compete. I see competing as an ultimate expression of all the time that I put in. I always say that the tournament's not won, it's a little cliche, but the tournament's not won that day, it's won like 6 months before. Yeah. Right? And so you got to make sure your diet is dialed in. We all make mistakes, you know, like there's been times I've gone to tournaments and I've won and I wasn't fully prepped. And there's times I've gone to tournaments where I was fully prepped and I still lost. Right? Like that's going to happen, but you can kind of leave, win or lose, with your head held high if you know that, you know, hey, I did everything I could to be here, the best shape I can be in, you know. Another big thing is, you know, removing some other stressors from your life. So, you know, going through college, I had a very tumultuous relationship for a couple of years, and I wasn't as competitively successful. And then once that relationship was out of my life, you know, I think within 2 months I'd won a world title at brown belt, right? And so it's not saying that was the reason why, but I think just cutting certain things out of your life that, pardon me, that cause undue stress, right? Like if you're staying up till 3 a.m. arguing with your girlfriend every night, or your wife, and then you're expecting to perform in the morning at your pro training, you got a tournament that weekend, it's going to be points off the board, right? Like you're going to be 1% worse or 5% worse. And then, you know, you go in there and you may know that, and that's a confidence lessener, right? You get a little bit of a hit to your confidence, and then that's kind of a compounding effect. And so, you know, I remember one of the big matches I had was against Luke Griffith, who is a ADCC second placer. He's very good. multiple time world champion as well, and he only focuses on no-ghee at the time. I'm mainly focused on no-ghee now, but at the time I was split focused as the World Open Class Final at brown belt, and at no-ghee Worlds. And I remember looking at him, and I'm a pretty big guy, but he's a humongous guy. He's a humongous guy. He's like 6'6", maybe 260, 250, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's a big dude.
And I remember looking at Pedro, and I was like, hey, you think I got this, bro? And he looked at me, he's like, for sure, bro. And he told me after, he's like, bro, I was very nervous for you. He's like, but I knew you could do it. I was very nervous for you. But I remember looking at him, and I started thinking, I was like, man, I know he's lost before. I started thinking about some of the people he's lost, and I was like, I could probably beat those people. You kind of got to just trick yourself.
Yeah.
And you're just feeling, and you'll feel the momentum of a match, Another thing I'd say is fatigue makes cowards of us all. So make sure you're conditioned when you go in, right? And train as if you're going to, a lot of people, they train, especially coming from a hobbyist gym and then going into a tournament. And you got to realize, like, you may train 3 times a week and you may be like an attorney and you want to hop into a local tournament, but you might fight somebody like you or me. Like, this is, our whole mindset is, fighting and, like, when I was a blue belt, I'm a little bit kinder now, but when I was a blue belt, like, I still want to, impose my will and mentally break my opponent on the mat, but I was intent on, like, destroying you at blue belt. And there were some guys that I fought, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done what I did to them because, like, breaking, like, a 45-year-old dad that hopped in the adult division's leg or something, right? It's like, probably not the best thing to do, but hey, you stepped in the ring, you step on the mat, like, it's a tournament now. It's no longer like, I would never do that in training, but it's no longer a fun thing. Like, you're trying to hurt me, I'm trying to hurt you. And I think a lot of people, they get stuck in that, like, oh, it's a martial art, it's the gentle art. It's really not, though, right? Like, if you look back,
no,
like,
it's not gentle at all.
It's not gentle at all. And if you look back why jiu-jitsu was created, and the gym wars that the Gracies would partake in, and dojo storm other karate gyms and beat the living shit out of some of these karate instructors until, I remember Carlos Ricardo told me a long time ago, they beat some karate guy up in Brazil, and it was so bad they just started calling him It, because his face was so destroyed, by pinning him down a mountain, just elbowing his face or whatever. But, like, that's kind of the originations, right? And if you, like, keep going back and back and back, I mean, martial arts came from needing hand-to-hand skills for war, right? Back in the day before guns and things along those lines. Like, the whole thing for, my dad's a judo black belt, but he explained to me that ippon in judo comes from Japan, of throwing somebody on the ground and then taking out your sword and finishing them or pulling them off of a horse. And then if they landed on both shoulders, that would knock the air out of them. That's what signals the end of the match, because that would be, then you would then die.
Yes.
Right? And so I think that, if you're going to just do it for fun, do it. But I think anybody that signs up for a tournament, you got to be ready to fight. And it can be scary, and it's obviously, it's not like an MMA fight. I teach a lot of guys at Fortis MMA, and that's a little bit more of a fight, I think. Like, I like to call them more matches, because it's, you can get kneed in the face and get,
I agree with that. As a combative expert, I didn't like it when I'd go to competitions and people would be like, oh, I got to fight in like 5 minutes. I'm like, it's not a fight.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a match.
Exactly. Even from the MMA standpoint, like, you may look at the MMA guys and they're like, I got to fight, and you're like, well,
no, I mean, I would say MMA is a fight.
100%. But you even were at a higher level of that on the sliding spectrum. It's like you were out there, like, fighting, like, to the death. Underneath that would probably be like MMA, and then under that is kind of split off into the other, like, karate, jiu-jitsu, judo, those are things. It's all on the sliding scale of combat, right? But one is just higher stakes, right? And so, but I would say, if you're going to put your name in there, do the work, obviously. I think anybody that's listening to a podcast like this is going to be somebody that's, hopefully hardworking and things along those lines. But I think that also doing all the things outside of the mat, I mean, that's just pretty common, I think, to be a good athlete. Like Michael Phelps, he says he trains every Sunday, and I do as well. I already put in about 2.5 hours in the mats before, we're doing this show right now. And the reason is because if I don't train every Sunday, that's 52 days out of the year that I'm not training. And that's almost 2 months, right? So if you just take Saturday and Sundays off and you're only training 5 days a week, you're really not training for close to 4 months out of the year, right? If you think about it, right? Like somewhere along those lines. I mean, it's a lot of time off. It's like a 30-year year in a way, right? Because the week is 7 days. You take off 2 of those days. It's it's almost a third, right? And you take everybody's gonna take time off for injuries and things along those lines. So you're only gonna be training, 8 months out of the year.
So. Right now.
Exactly, right? But we'll get you back soon. But that would be kind of my thing. Like, make sure you're training consistently. I would always say, like, the slow approach. Like, it's much better to do a session every day than, like, kill yourself 3 times a week. You know, like I think consistency and just day to day, because you're going to make progressions, you're going to plateau, and then keep going up. It's just that day to day consistency.
So how do you balance your hard training days and your drilling days, your softer training days?
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of have a strategy. I got lunch with Bernardo Faria when I was doing some of the filming for BJJ Fanatics a while ago when we were in Boston, and he told me he's talking to John Danaher, you know, arguably probably the best active coach right now in Jiu-Jitsu, I would say.
I think a lot of people would agree with that.
You know, he's very cerebral, you know, very systematic, which is something that was kind of new to Jiu-Jitsu. And
I mean, the guy's a savant, right?
It's a savant, exactly, you know. I think he has his degree from like Columbia or something in philosophy. He's a stud. But he kind of has a philosophy of you bike uphill for a number of years, and then you're kind of biking downhill, and it's more of a grind to maintain. I still see myself as biking uphill, but even for me now, like I'll train really hard in the morning. One thing I'd say is just wake up early and train. You know, it's if you don't have time, just wake up earlier. So like I wake up at like 5:30 a.m. and I get to training around 6:30 or 7, and you know I train till 8:30 or 9, and then I work. Kind of my schedule is I work after that, my day job, and then in the evenings I'll drill and I'll lift. And so I get in 3 days most days. And that is a definite big time commitment, but it's what I'm passionate about. I don't lift all the time. A lot of times I'll be lifting more consistently during camps and things like that. But my evening training, I'm either training with hobbyists or I'm drilling, right? Or I'm doing a high intensity drill, right? Or I'll split it to where I'm wrestling in the evenings. So I don't do the same thing. And I try to give myself 6 to 8 hours between hard sessions. So if I train at 7 a.m. really hard to 9, I'm not going to train hard again up until like 5 or 6 p.m. You know, it's like 8, 9 hours later, right? Because hopping in, doing I think a lot of people, especially when they're first starting, they're like, I gotta train hard all the time, and they'll do the hard 7 a.m. class, then the hard noon class.
It's just a recipe for injury.
Yes, it's just you're breaking your body down, right? You're gonna go, you know.
So, you know, for our listeners, Steffen's 25, I'm 50. We have different approaches when it comes to training because, you know, I'm a lot older. I've had a lot more injuries over the years, and it takes me longer to recover than Steffen. So, Steffen, what is your recovery like? What do you do to recover from in between those hard trainings and those ladder trainings? And you said you're training almost 7 days a week when you're getting ready. How do you, how do you recover?
Honestly, I don't do enough for recovery, but I think a lot of time, especially if you're a little bit younger, I think prioritizing training over recovery is important. That's at least in the kind of the stage I'm in right now. I think that your body naturally will acclimate to what you do every day.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like if you're, like I said, if you're going into the gym, you know, after you haven't trained for a month and killing yourself, you're gonna feel terrible. You know, you get like rhabdo or something, right? Yeah. But if you're just consistent day by day, like I always say, there's a hump in jiu-jitsu. Like the first 6 months suck especially if you don't have that much natural talent. And then once you pass over that 6 months, you start at least becoming to the new people more the hammer than the nail, and then it kind of starts getting more fun. And so, you know, you'll miss all the skin off your toes, your hips are gonna hurt, your shoulders are gonna hurt, but kind of getting through that, your body will just kind of naturally acclimate, I think. But I mean, a big thing is like, you know, I'll catch a nap in the afternoon. I think sleep is huge.
I'm pretty much a professional napper at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
I try to race myself in a game of nap every day.
Yeah, exactly. Supplementation can work too, you know. So
what kind of supplements do you take?
Fish oil is great. Recently I've been taking some of the methylation stuff. Have you heard about that?
Like methylene blue?
No, I
just recently heard about this stuff. So
yeah. So my functional medicine doctor got me on it. It's what Dana White is like big on right now.
Okay.
And there's one guy I know, John Jones is working with him. One of my buddies, Simon, was over there for his camp against Steve, which was kind of cool. He's sending me some pictures and stuff. It was kind of cool.
Oh.
But they brought that guy, and I forget, but he's really big on it. I believe it like removes toxins out of the body, and it does some stuff. I'm not educated enough to talk about it, but I do a lot of online research, and I kind of see how I feel. I started taking creatine like a year ago, took it for a week, felt terrible, so I just stopped. Like if I hear that it's good and I take it and I don't like it, then I stop. Right, because there's been some times where I've gone into tournaments where my buddy will be like, "Man, this is awesome! It's a nitric oxide booster. You're gonna feel your cardio is gonna go for days." And I'll take it. Like I remember I took it at American Nationals. I took some nitric oxide booster, and I fought the first match, and I got off, and I was like, I can't uncurl my leg.
Yeah,
like I had such a pump that I was like touching my leg, and it felt like this tabletop, and I was like, I'm in trouble. And I still had more matches, and so it was just not a great day. So like that's another thing too. Don't add anything new to your routine. Like if you're competing in 3 weeks and you haven't been in camp already for like 3 months, just say the same thing you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you had a tournament,
Don't take some new supplement.
Don't take some new supplement. Don't up your training schedule by, you know, triple, 4 times, whatever. Just kind of stay in your same rhythm and groove. And then, like I said, again, a lot of people get burned out. I think a lot of times it's not it's not who's here, it's who's left.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, if you just don't quit, you're eventually going to get good. The majority of people that I got involved in training, either they quit at white belt or they quit at blue belt.
Yeah.
This whole, like, the almost 10 years I've been training, I think I've only had 2 guys that I started with that kind of made it through.
Yeah.
That are still training. It's a lot of attrition.
Well, there's that saying, right? Like a black belt's a white belt that just didn't quit.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And like I said, again, like, you're going to get dangerous. You don't have to be a world-class competitor. I think every man, it's his duty to be able to protect himself and his family. Right? And even biblically, like, if you can't defend what you have, in a way, it's not yours in a sense, you know? And
completely agree.
yeah, right. And so, like, I was talking to one of my good friends and mentors, Andy Rovat. He wrestled in the 2008 Olympics, stud wrestler, you know, and the wrestlers think a little differently. You know, they're a little eccentric, they're a little quirky in their certain ways. And he always tells me, like, hey, you know, you have to be able to, hand-to-hand, man-to-man, you have to be able to defend your home, right? Like, take everything out, take out the guns, take everything else out. You face a man across from you, you should be able to be confident, at least you've been there, right? Like, I remember I taught this one guy, and I taught him I think I might have told you the story, but I was teaching him in a beginner class. I don't teach a lot of beginner classes anymore, but teaching him a beginner class, and we were going over, like, basic grip breaks in the gis, when I was training a lot of gi, kimono stuff. And I remember I grabbed him, same side collar grip, and I just curled up like this.
Yeah.
And I remember the shock and panic that just overcame his face. And I looked, and I saw his kids on the bench, like 20 feet away. And I was like, oh, this dude's never been grabbed by another man.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't know what that feels like. And I'm like, how can you feel comfortable having children, you know, and somebody, you know, God forbid, like, hurts your daughter, hurts your son. You have to have that ability to, like, violence isn't the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer, right? And so and you would know that better than everyone, right? Like,
yeah. I really like the way Jordan Peterson says it. Right, when he talks about a man should be dangerous.
Yes.
You should have it under control.
yes,
Right? Like, if you're not capable of violence, right, then you're harmless.
exactly. Like, your only option is to be kind.
Right.
If there's no nice guys, there's only kind men, right? Because if you're a kind man, you have the ability to do something, but you keep that for when it needs to happen.
Yeah, I don't think today's world fosters that
I
as
agree.
much anymore.
I agree.
Right? I mean, there's young men like you that, you know, had a dad that was a black belt judo, and then, you got into wrestling and jiu-jitsu and everything else. And then, you know, I grew up in a time where it was just more common to fight. You know, it wasn't frowned upon. People weren't getting sued.
Yes.
You know, you could fight the kid, you know, that
Yes.
lived across the street, and, you know, you'd be best friends the next day.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't going to go grab guns and shoot each other.
Yes.
You know,
100% agree.
it was just different, right? And today's world doesn't. I think there's kind of a lack of masculinity.
Yes, and a lack of accountability.
Yes.
Right? Because, like,
You know.
people say people feel, especially, we'll get into a whole nother topic, but I feel like with social media especially, people feel that they can say things with impunity.
Yes.
And it's like, it's kind of like road rage, right? Like, you know, people try to hit you with their car or something. Road rage is kind of crazy, and especially in Texas. And it's like,
It's everywhere.
it's everywhere for sure, right?
Yeah.
But, like, if I'm in the supermarket line, you wouldn't come up next to me and body slam me to get in front of me. Like, you would say, hey, excuse me, man. And I would say, oh, no, you're good, bro.
Yeah.
Right? And there would be this kind of mutual respect because it's face to face.
Yeah.
But I think the same thing happens over social media. People feel like I can say whatever I want to say.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no consequences.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there should be consequences, but in a way there should be, right? And there should be some accountability at least. But I think, like, a dangerous society is a polite society.
Right.
Right? Like, if you are a man that is capable of defending yourself and being violent, you don't want to do that because you know where that goes, right? Like, like, you always tell me when we're talking privately, you're like, hey, you know, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but, like, if like, for your home defense course that I took, you're like, hey, if I think there's a home intruder in my house, I'm going to come and I'm going to peek in on my kids and say, hey, stay here, get under the bed. I don't want you to see what's about to happen, right? Obviously, that makes common sense.
Right.
That's common sense, but you want to shield them from the violence.
Yes.
Right? Because something might have to happen, but you want to protect them, right? And that's in my opinion, the man's role, right? Provide and protect.
Yeah.
Versus nowadays, I feel like, you know, men, in a way, a lot of them don't have even that capability. And so they think that they're going to do something, or they think that it's just not going to happen. Like, I was talking to one of my good friends the other day, and he was saying he was getting dinner with his in-laws. Pardon me. And he said that his father-in-law said that they don't believe in any violence, and they don't believe in training, and they don't believe, in the Second Amendment, and they don't believe in all these different things. And he said, okay, he said, well, what if a guy came over from across the table and took that glass of wine and poured it over your wife's head? And his father-in-law said, I would ask him why he did that. And he
didn't get laid that night, by the way.
100%. And I told him, I was like, it's just a different mindset, right? And I was like,
I don't understand that kind of weakness.
I don't understand that kind of weakness either, right? It's victim.
I was joking around with my son the other day. He's 12, and I'm trying to make him tougher right now. I was deployed for a lot of years, right? And he's got severe dyslexia. So my wife kind of mollycoddled him, so now that I'm home more all the time, I'm bringing him up, trying to become a man, right? And he kind of shuts down sometimes, and, he kind of gets this like little weak voice going, and, the other day he was kind of being that way. I'm like, son, your weakness is offending my masculinity.
Yeah.
And, I did it in a way, he started laughing. He was like,
of course.
So I wasn't like, like picking on him that way.
But that's the man's, that's the dad's duty.
We made a joke out of it, but like that, I know that kind of sinks in.
Of course.
Like, hey,
imagine you didn't have that.
Stop acting weak.
Yeah.
You're not weak. It's my job to make you a man.
Exactly, make you strong.
Right?
Yeah.
So I can't, for that exact scenario you're talking about, like I can't imagine that. I hope that guy changes his mind.
I agree. Yeah.
I hope that he is around enough other people, or just violence never finds him.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Because if it does, he's just going to be a victim.
Yes. Yeah. My buddy told me, he's like, after he said that, he's like, I was like, all right, man, that's cool, bro. He's like, that's cool, sir. Like, I get it. He's like, where can we go from there? It's such polarity of views, right? Like, somebody comes up and assaults your wife, and you're, why would you do that, man? Right? It's just but again, that man most likely has no capability.
Right.
Right? Like, if he had a capability to defend himself and his family, it just wouldn't happen. In most cases, it wouldn't even happen.
Right.
Right? Because it's that I believe in like the feel people give off, right? Like, if you're at a gas station, you see that guy got the jeans on with the boots and the jacket, and he's got the lifted truck. You're like, that guy probably knows something about something, right? Versus,
he'll at least fight. He'll at least fight.
We'll at least
try. May not go gentle into that good night.
Exactly.
Right. Like Reagan says.
Yeah.
Right. Reagan. Peace through strength. Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah, I completely agree with that. So, going back to kind of the mindset, I can tell where you're coming from on a lot of this stuff. Mm-hmm. 1 minute before you walk through the cage, before you walk onto the mats, what's going through your mind right then?
Okay, so when I walk to the bullpen, I believe in a lot of psychological tricks, and so I'm always,
Excuse me.
No, you're good. You're good. I always try to mentally psych my opponent. I remember I actually had somebody do kind of like a mini psyop on me at American Nationals a couple years ago. He wore a black belt ranked rash guard, right, and then he came up into the warm up area and like punked me. And I'd already won the weight in the open division in the gi as a brown belt, and this is like a couple months before getting my black belt, and then he was like warming up, and then he like kicked me doing some long step past him, like it kind of in my head, and I looked, and he's like, "Get out of my way, dude." And I looked at him, and I was like, "He's a black belt, like I don't really want, like I know where that would go, and I'm like, You got it, bro." I just moved out of his way, and I called my coach, Joao, and I said, "Hey man, this guy just kicked me in the head, like." He wasn't there at the time. He was still in Dallas. It was just me and my dad out there, and I didn't really have my team with me or anything. And I was like, "Hey," he's like, "Hey, you'll get him at black belt. It's fine. Don't worry." And I was like, "Okay." And so then I just let it go, and I was like, "I need to get my, he didn't kick me hard, but I need to get my mind right." So I walked to the bullpen, and like I don't know, I have this feeling when I walk into the bullpen. So for people that don't know, when you walk into when your name shows up on the screen on an IBGF screen, which is like the main federation. You walk into like, it's literally a bullpen, right? It's like this plastic bullpen, and then everybody for your division's called in there. So everybody's sizing each other out. There's a lot of this like bravadoism that kind of comes along, But I walk in there, and I walk in there with confidence, right? And I'm feeling confident at that time. All my doubts just kind of go out, It's at that point, it's full commitment. It's like, why would I not be confident, right? Yeah. So I walk in, I'm getting like a little adrenaline thinking about it right now, you know? I walked in and I remember I see that guy that kicked me in the head that was now in a brown belt ranked rash guard that was sitting down, right? And I saw he had, I forget his team. I really don't remember his team, but I looked at his team and I'm like, I bet he's my first match. You know, I just had an intuition feeling. And I believe a lot, and like, I'm a big believer, and so I'm praying and things along those lines, you know, before I fight always. But I walked over to the screen, I see his name and my name, boop, on the bottom of the screen, you know, 10 minutes. And I just look at him, and I'm like, all right, you're gonna get it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I start stretching, and I'm looking at it as I'm stretching. And, you know, it's all psychological. I'm standing over him when I'm stretching. I'm doing things to make him uncomfortable, making him, you know. Because now before it was like, hey, I'll move out of your way, man. Like, I don't want, you know, any problems.
Yeah,
but now we're about to go.
Well, you're a ranking belt.
Yeah.
I'll give you the mat space.
Yeah, exactly. But now it's like we're gonna go, and now I'm gonna make you uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna impede in your space, and I'm gonna mentally psy up on you, right?
Yeah.
And so we step onto the mats, and the ref calls us in, and you know, we slap hands, and I think I pulled guard, and he started talking to me, which is one of the first times a lot of guys at black belt have talked to me. There's just a lot of times, you know, the guy maybe you're fighting at black belt, and we start talking a little shit to each other. It's almost funny, but at brown belt I didn't know him from Adam. So he starts talking to me, oh man, stand up and wrestle me like a man, wrestle me and all these things. And so I think I got into his legs maybe like 25 seconds into the match, and I got him into like a very nasty like cloverleaf footlock, and I was gonna break his shin bone, like his tib fib, and that's the two, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I got here and I start cranking, and I remember him going tap 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 tap, and I released enough to where it wouldn't break, and I looked at him and said, are you done? Kind of looked at me, and the ref was kind of like, and I knew the ref at the time, so I think he gave me an extra second. I was like, are you done? He's like, yeah, I'm done. I was like, all right then. And I kind of went like this, you know. He kind of came up and apologized to me after, but again, you know, it's the physicality speaks, right? Like being able to actually go out there and do that is what gave me the apology. You know, it's one of those deals. And so, like when I step in the bullpen, I always give a prayer before I go on, and that's my own thing that I say to myself. You know, it's kind of out of my hands at that point, right? Like I've done the work, and now I'm just gonna believe that was enough. You know, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
It kind of takes my, I'm just kind of on autopilot.
Yeah.
But from like my thought processes and my mindset, I'm usually just going over what I'm gonna do. You know, if I'm going to club left hand, I'm going over how I'm going to club him. I'm thinking, I was drilling that before.
Yeah.
I'll get a sweat in, so I'll do some calisthenics and something, you know, like the actual physical thing. But the mental side of things, I'm just prepping. A lot of times, especially, you know, me having some competition success, I'll be on the better seat of the bracket. So my first two matches don't really count. A lot of the time, you could fight some NCAA D1 national champ or something the first round, and he's unranked. Like Pat Downey could be your first match, right? Like super tough guy. But the majority of the time, it's just a random dude the first couple of matches. So a lot of times I use those guys as warm-ups. And so my first match, I'll actually try to let go a little bit longer. So if it's a 10-minute match, I'll try to make it like a 7 or 8 minute match and really get a sweat going on. Submit them, and then I'm warm for the rest of the matches. Versus if I just go out there and just murder this guy, 30, 40 seconds, boom, arm lock, he screams or something. And then my next match is with a tough guy, or 2 matches I have a tough guy, and I'm not warm, right? So I'll always try to warm up. There'll be times where I'll be in mount on somebody, I'm looking at the clock, and my coach will be like, finish him, I'll be like, relax. Like, you know, and I also think too, it's good to have a coach that shows up for you, you know? Mm-hmm. And so that's really important. For two things, your opponent's gonna hear them, right? And I'm a loud coach, you know, but I also think that you should have a coach that's intelligent, that can actually give you call outs, you know? Like when I was like a white belt and stuff, I was with more of like a team that wasn't very competitive and stuff, like white and some of blue. And so, go hard, don't stop. Like I'm doing my best, right? But now with the guys that I'm connected with,
not giving you anything specific.
Not giving me anything specific.
Yeah.
And the last Who's Number One I did, I had one of my good mentors, Laurent Marion. He was in my corner, and it's very detailed. Left hand, inverse grip on his right hand, pin it to the mat, step over shin pummel. You know, it's these very specific, systematic ways of dismantling your opponent and mentally breaking them. I think sometimes you need that go, 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 go. You need that push. But I'm already, so for me, it's like, I won't coach you if I have to do that. If you're not a self-starter and you don't already know to go hard, I won't coach you. Like I have some people that I've taught, and they're like, oh, I don't want to hurt my opponent. Like if I get him in an arm bar, like I've had some people and I've dropped them as students, because they'll be like, we'll be talking, this is all you have to tell me. Oh, you know, if I'm fighting for you in a tournament and I'm on your team and I get a guy in an arm bar and he won't tap, I'll just let it go if it means I lose the match. I just don't want you in my corner. Oh, I don't want to hurt anybody. Then you shouldn't be competing. Would love to have you on the team as a team member, but I'm not going to allow you to compete under me, because now I know that you're not willing to do what it takes to win. right? And so that doesn't mean grab that arm and snap it, but it's the technique is to dislocate and break the arm. You should go till the opponent capitulates, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Yes, and I have very few injuries that I've caused people in tournaments because I do give them time to tap, right? Like I think maybe outside of blue belt, all my leg locks wins, and I have a few, you know, at brown and black belt, never hurt anybody because I grab it and I let them know I'm like, you know, the way I grab it. And, you know, I fought Stephen Mowry a number of years. He's a 6'10", at the time he was 10-0 as a, or 6'9", as a MMA fighter in Bellator, Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Gilbert Burns. So like very legit lineage from, you know, fight sports, goes back to Cyborg and stuff. I remember I fought him and I got him in an inside heel hook. And he's huge, right? He's hard to control. He's so much bigger than me. And I grabbed it and I started cranking. It was an inside heel hook from 50-50 and I looked at him and he was like, "You got it?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Tap." And he came up to me after, he was like, "Hey man, thanks for not ending my career."
Yeah.
And I was like, "All good, man. Like, I'm not there for that. I'm there to win, right? I'll do what it takes to win, but I'm not there to hurt anybody." And you see certain guys in the sport, like Kuzma Paul Juarez, and like, they're
But
there.
had he not tapped, you would have kept going.
Of course, I would have had to. He would have made that decision.
Yes.
I am just
Yeah.
the facilitator of that.
Yes.
Right? But, you know, like there's some guys in the sport that like, especially the lower belts, like they're there to hurt you. Right? And I'm sure the same thing in the military. Like you saw some guys, like they weren't there to help. They were just there to hurt. You know what I mean? I'm sure you met people in the armed forces like that. I would assume there's some people like that. And there's people like that in jiu-jitsu everywhere, right? There's just people that don't maybe have great moral compasses that like are in there to like, oh, I don't want to win the match. I want to break that dude's arm. And I was never like that. I'm still not like that. I want to win. You know, I'll do what it takes to win, but I'm not there to injure anybody. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of my mindset going in. I think, you know, and then another thing too is, I mean, I'm there to break you mentally. You know, I love being able to fight somebody and know that I'll never fight that version of them again because I took something from them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's
a
unique perspective.
Yeah, you know, but it's like I fought some guys, like, I won't say their name, but I fought some guys and the first match was incredibly difficult, but I won. And then I fought them like 4 more times and every time I got easier. Yeah. Because every time I took a little piece of them.
Well, they had it already mentally.
Exactly.
Right? That they were going to lose to you.
Exactly. And my kind of thing too is if I can put 30 points on you or 50 points before, I will.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not there to like do a quick flashy submission. Like I want to systematically. That's another thing too is I think a lot of times guys will be like, "Oh, well, you caught me." Never want anybody to say that about me. Like, "Oh, you were able to catch that on me." But next time, I'm like, no, I want to take you down, pin you, or pull, sweep you, pass you, take your back, and then strangle you.
Well, rarely is there lucky grappling.
But everybody can self-explain that, right? Like if the match starts, I pull close guard and I armbar you in 30 seconds. Oh man, he caught me. Yeah. Right? Versus like if I go out there and like, let's say I pull, I sweep, I pass, I mount, then I strangle you from top mount. Like there's really nothing, like in the match is 6 minutes long. Like you know, you got dogged out for 6 minutes, you mentally broke, and then you tapped. Like I've tapped some dudes just from pressure. You know, I've tapped some dudes in like.
I felt your pressure.
Thank you. Yeah. I've tapped some guys like even in like world semifinals and finals matches at the colored belts with just pressure, not even a submission. It was just mentally they did not want to be there anymore and they were frustrated. And that's the true win to me. That's kind of where I get. Yeah, but that's the competitor, right? Like that's the competitor in me that wants to do that.
I think that's probably one of the most rewarding taps, the pressure taps.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And especially like, and once you get on somebody one time, you get on 100 more times, right? And that would be another thing I would say, like if you're training, like especially if you get a little bit more advanced, if you tap the pressure, you start building a mental river in your brain where that's like a pathway to take. You know, that's what I always say. Like there's been times where I almost wanted to tap to pressure. I'm sure I've done it before, you know, but like I kick myself after because I'm like, man, I did that, and now I know I can do it again.
I don't, you know, I pressure tap a lot of lower color belts all the time, right? And then they feel bad. And I look at them and I'm like, hey, man, I'm a black belt. And a lot of times I'm heavier than them. I'm like, dude, I'm this many, you know.
Years ahead of you.
I'm this many years ahead of you. I'm heavier than you. I'm stronger than you. I know they say don't ever pressure tap, but I was about to break your fucking ribs, bro.
Yeah.
What's better, right?
100%.
You to tap right now 100%. And come back tomorrow and us keep us keep rolling and us keep training and you getting better.
Yeah.
I'm like, now every time we go, you'll be able to take more and more pressure.
100%.
But don't let me break your ribs right now.
Yes.
Because
No,
I
that's
can't
legit.
tell, like I feel like I'm
That's
tight
legit.
on you.
That's legit.
But I don't. But I can't 100% tell if your rib's about to snap or not. You can.
100%.
So I think there's a balance,
Of course,
with that.
Just to clarify, when I mean by pressure, I mean more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, like the guy's crossface underhook on you, and you're trying to breathe, and the little air's coming in, but you're still breathing. You're not going out, right? Breathing, like that is mental weakness. Versus like, there's been many times where like, I remember one time my
well, I guess especially in practice, right?
Yes. Yeah. Like one time my professor, he's Joao Gabriel, she's stud, beat Marigali, beat Bouchesh, all this. He picked me up to throw me, and he got me so high. I just tapped in the air. I was like, "Hey, you got it," because like those are smart things.
There's no need to get thrown through
the
ground.
Yes, those are smart things. Or there's times where he's body triangling me, and my ribs have almost like they start slipping. I'm like, "Hey, tap tap." That's totally fine. But if somebody's just on mount on you and you're uncomfortable,
thanks for clarifying that for our listeners.
Yeah, I think that's weakness and something that should be bred out of you. Like, if you're brand new. I always say tap early, tap often if you're brand new. But if you're 2, 3, 4 years into the game and you're tapping because you're uncomfortable, I think that's bad. I think that's bad. Yeah. This one guy I know said that, I just thought it was a funny quote, but he said that a 250-pound black belt on top of you with double underhooks and mount is better than a Xanax if you can find your way out. For like mental, like not panicking under stress and things like that. I always thought that was a kind of funny anecdote.
Yeah. It's funny. I train at Formigas, and I found myself under 250-pound black belts pretty often. Yeah. There's some big dudes there.
And if you realize, right, like just relaxing.
Oh, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I can figure my way out of this.
It's untying the knot.
If I relax.
It's human chess. It's just untying the knot.
There's relaxing enough to figure out, to figure your way out of that. It's during buds, we do this thing, second phase, right, where we do pull comp. They tie our hoses and nuts, and you're doing it all on a breath hold. This is after they've knocked all the air out of you, punched you in the lungs, need you in the ribs, ripped your face mask off. You got to do all this stuff, and untie these knots. It's very similar, right? Yeah, for sure. Except you're underwater.
It's a little more difficult.
A little bit more difficult.
A little bit more difficult.
But it's similar. It kind of reminds me of the, the.
Did you ever pass out while you were? Like pool blackouts or whatever they call them?
Yeah, shallow water blackouts. I never passed out. I've definitely had the tunnel come and then broke the surface right before that happened. I have passed out a few times in jiu-jitsu though. I've definitely been choked out a few times in jiu-jitsu where I was just fighting those chokes too long, thought I was good, and then the next thing it was unicorns and butterflies. And I'm like, hey.
I remember, I don't know if I've ever been fully put out. The closest because I'll just tap. Like if you got me, I'll tap, But I was training with Alexander Trans, and amazing guy, awesome guy. He owns some gyms in the area, Progresso. But he was on my back, and he's a big guy. He's 6'5", 240, 245 at the time. He's a multi-time world silver medalist, European open class champ. Like he's really, really good. And he got me in like a cross choke from the back. He was hanging off my body, pulling my head off. Yeah. And I remember I just like got a finger in, and I was going like this. Yeah. And finally, I kind of pulled him off, and then he went up to stand up, and I kind of like dropped to one knee, and I was kind of like, doing that whole thing. And I remember I was like, man, something's in my eye, and I went because I couldn't see it, and I went to rub it, and I was like, I just can't see out of it. And I said, give me a second. And like somehow it was weird. It was like all the I couldn't see, like my whole eye it was as if I was going like this. It took a few seconds to kind of clear up, and I was like, whoa, I think I almost went to sleep. He's like, you okay, bro?
Oh no, I've definitely gone to sleep a few times. The first time I went to sleep was guy was a purple belt, and I was just doing no-ghee. Yeah. And he goes, hey, you got to start training the gi.
And I'll do it.
And I'm like, no, I want to keep doing no-ghee. He goes, and I'd been doing no-ghee for about 6 months to a year, and he'd already been doing it for 5+ years, as a purple belt. And I was like, no. He's like, all right, let's make a bet. And he's a fellow team guy. And he goes, all right, I'm going to go with the gi. You go no-ghee. And if I win, you got to start training with the gi. I was like, all right. Yeah. He put me in Ezekiel. Well, I didn't know what
You
the
know
hell
that
in
existed,
Ezekiel.
right?
I didn't even know
Yeah, he had something
Ezekiel
up his
existed.
sleeve literally
doing
for you,
no-gi.
right?
Oh yeah, and I was like, all right, this sucks. I think
This
I
is
can
an
take my way
Ezekiel, for
through
people
it.
that don't know. You reach inside your own
Yeah.
sleeve, and this hand cuts across the neck, and then
Yeah.
the head is in that little pocket there.
I was like, all right, this sucks. I feel like I can fight through that. I'm like, all right, man, bridge roll.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah,
I
they
remember
come
him
on quick.
standing over me like, Randy. I'm like, I guess I got to start doing gi, huh?
Yeah. There you
It's
go.
like, yep.
Yeah, now you love the gi.
Yeah, I love the gi. But, it's funny, like, I had this, literally this epiphany. As an operator, when I first started jiu-jitsu, I just wanted to do no-gi because I'm like, well, the guys I go against at the time, most of my combat experience had been in Afghanistan. And, the guys aren't, they're half the time they don't even have a shirt on, a lot of these guys we were wrapping up, or they'd be in like man jams, but, it's not like their clothing is really strong, right? So it's not like I could choke somebody out with their clothing over there or do whatever. But, even though my enemy may be half naked or whatever, I'm covered in handles as an operator.
Like your
Even my collar at the time, right? I had a zip up collar, cry top, right? And I would fold up my sleeves, so they were at my forearm, which perfect, shelf grip right there on my sleeves. Yep. My whole kit, right? I've got wires, I've got a chin strap.
Yep.
So I'm like, I'm literally covered in handles. And if I don't know how to break grips or negate grips or keep my balance while somebody's trying to swing me around by this, I'm behind the power curve.
Yeah.
So I found that gi can kind of help that.
Translate for sure.
Yeah, because if you're not used to being grabbed and swung around by your clothing, that is a different little fight right there.
Yeah.
To try to keep your feet, break those grips, counter grip, so that's why I started, I started doing the gi after that, and I fell in love with the gi. And I found it to make it a pretty easy transition, even now when I go do no-gi now, just because, I started out with no-gi, then I went to gi. And I do think it's more difficult for people, that haven't been training for a long time to train no-gi and then put a gi on.
For sure.
Because now all of a sudden, like, this is another animal.
Yeah.
This is a new thing. So I do think it's easier for people that
it's more complicated.
If you train with the gi first and then you go to no gi, you're kind of like, all right, well, my collar grip is now a collar tie.
Yes.
For
sure.
I can't grab the sleeve, but I can grab the wrist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So these are, I can still grab the back of the tricep. Maybe I'm framing and posting more than some of the other things, but I found that to be an easier transition.
I'm with you. Yeah, I agree.
My no-gi is not as horrible, when I train gi a lot, So
I agree with that for sure.
Well, Steffen, do you have any final words for us or for our listeners?
I don't think so.
About any mental prep for, competing?
Yeah, the one thing I'd say is there's really, as cliche as it sounds, there is no trick to it. I don't see myself as being special or anything. I put a lot of time. I put in over 10,000 hours. If I've calculated it before, it keeps growing, right? But it's compounding interest. But I put in a lot of time on the mat. That time translates to skill, right? It's mat time. Like one of my mentors, Adam, he always tells me, like in anything, right? Like relationships, business, friendships, family, whatever. Good or bad, it's all mat time, right? And so the more mat time you spend on the mats, learning. One thing I'd say is make sure you get with a quality gym. That doesn't necessarily mean that the guy's Brazilian. I think a lot of people, they're like, I have to get with a Brazilian coach. That's not true. There's a lot of great Americans or European or whatever, right? Like Alexander Trans.
Look at the top guy today.
Exactly. Yeah, Gordon, exactly, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of, especially as the sport starts getting more popular, more professional within the United States, a lot of people are taking it up, or they're coming from a wrestling background.
Yeah.
But like, for instance, Alexander Trans amazing guy, owns some gyms in the area.
Yeah.
I believe he's from Denmark, so it's,
I do think it's important to give credit where credit's due, though, in the fact that, even though jiu-jitsu in one way has become more Americanized, right, with like, they've got American Jiu-Jitsu there in San Diego now, right? The guy that, I'm going to butcher his name. But Keenan, right? That was on the tip of my tongue. He branched off from Galval, right? And, when we look at, but to give the Brazilians where credit is due and the Great Sweeps where credit is due, they did bring the sport that you and I love,
of course,
to America.
Of course.
Right? And then what we've just done here is it's just evolved. It's taken, it's gone from what they did and just, they've added techniques from American wrestling, right? Which, and catch wrestling, and, Dean Lister was famous for, the ankle locks and the heel hooks.
The new leg lock meta and everything else. Yeah,
all that stuff, right? Wasn't big, or really existent, right? When the Gracies first brought it over. Now, you look how the sport's evolved. So, even though we say, you don't have to have a Brazilian coach, I do like to give credit where credit's due, because, if it wasn't for them bringing that here to America, you and I wouldn't have the sport that we love so much.
No, of course, yeah. No, I definitely give the credit there. I think people can get stuck in that loop of saying, like, my coach has to be Brazilian. I have to fight. Go for the best guy in your area that you.
I agree with that.
That you get along with the best too. Another thing too, I'd say is cross train. Like I always tell everybody, like for my gym, like don't come to my gym and pick me because I'm your friend, or like go train it. That's another sign I think of a really good coach. Go train at 20 different places. Find your best spot and then pick that. If that's not me, awesome.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter to me, right? Like jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu, but every gym has its own vibe. It's very tribal. Right, like once you get kind of entrenched, it's like, this is my team, you know.
We definitely have the cultures, right?
Yeah, definitely the cultures. Find your culture.
Yeah, and what I would tell people, like when team guys would ask me, hey, I want to start training jiu-jitsu, where should I train? I was like, make it easy for you.
Mm-hmm. It's huge.
Like for now, I drive 35, 40 minutes to go to Formiga's because, I like Formiga's gym. I like Double Five. I like the fact that there's 20 other black belts on the mat, and I really get challenged every time I go there. So the higher level you get, I think the more kind of places you're going to have to drive to to kind of find what you're looking for. But at first, I think make it convenient, especially if you're going to be a hobbyist at first and not a competitor. Like, what is the gym on your way home? Yeah. What is the gym like a block away from you?
What's the gym close to your kid's school? You can take them after.
Right. Yeah. So because when you're first learning it, before you fall in love with it, right, like you and I have fallen in love with it, it's important to just go.
I agree.
And if it's inconvenient for you to go, you'll find excuses not to go.
100%, yeah.
But if it's convenient for you to go and it's right there, then you've got no excuse.
Yes.
And then as you get into it and you're like, oh, I love this.
Yeah,
oh,
fun.
I like this. Yeah. Oh, this is fun. Oh, I want to start competing. And then you start to get higher and higher level. Then you're like, okay, now I need to find these places that can bring me up further.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, no, for sure.
So,
if you have competition aspirations, of course, find a comp gym. But if you just, like you said, if you're just training to train, that's the reason I didn't have aspirations to be any type of competitor when I first started. But I found myself onto a competition team pretty quickly, right? But just train at what's convenient. And another thing I'd say is make a commit. I think 3 times a week you can improve always.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I think once a week, twice a week, then it starts being like, oh, I trained 5 times this month. Because if it's twice a week, realistically, you're going to skip 1 or 2 a month. Yeah. It's just going to happen, right? Like I miss training sometimes. Family stuff happens, life stuff happens. Yeah. Then you're only training 4 times a month.
Yeah.
Or 6 times a month, and it starts.
Well, I will tell you, for me, at my age, I can probably train hard 2 to 3 times a week, and then the other days have to be drill days.
Yeah.
Or I'm just too sore and achy and tired. I can't lift weights like I want to, or I can't go through the football with my son, or I'm complaining every time I walk up the stairs or do anything or stand up out of a chair.
No, I get that.
Depending on your age and your activity level.
And your ability level, of course.
Yeah, and your ability level. At 50, going hard 3 times a week, by Friday, I feel those days.
Yeah.
And then you and I, we train on Thursdays, and we just do drilling those days to help improve my technique and things like that. And I think those days are important too. So as you get more into it, look at who you are, what kind of athlete you are, what your age is, what your recovery is like, and what your aspirations are within the sport.
I agree.
Yeah,
I totally agree with Randy. Randy's spot on with that.
Well, Steffen, thanks again for being here today. Thanks for answering these questions for our listeners. I know a lot of them have these questions. As always, we'd like to thank you guys for listening in on the show today. And any questions you guys have for us, feel free to hit us up. I'm big on the tactical side. Steffen's big on the jiu-jitsu side. We both cross-train, right? And we love all things American, all things patriotic. And, thanks for listening to the Patriot Point Show. Have a good one.